Hi everybody, welcome to the review of the Moses Comet race foil. I know it's been a while and it actually took me quite a long time to test this. Main reason was Moses did send me a new front wing, which took a little bit longer because I was having some issues, and they also changed their production around a little bit. And now there's a little bit of a difference on the finishing, so everything is good now. So we finally managed to get a proper test of this great foil. So let's get into it. The Comet is Moses' full-on race foil, featuring 111 centimeter mast and a quite high aspect ratio front and back wing system. It still features the standard fuselage made of aluminum, and this still makes it compatible with all the other wings you can get from Moses. Okay, let's get a bit into dimensions. The mast, as I said, is 1 meter and 11 centimeters long. The front wing has a span of 600 millimeters, so 60 cm, tip to tip. The back wing has a span of 380 millimeters, tip to tip. The fuselage, as always, is 71 centimeters long, and you have a 47 centimeter distance between your front and back wings, trailing edge, front wing, leading edge, back wing. The front wing has a slight anhedral with very large winglets, and the back wing is flat with also fairly large winglets on the wingtips. The Moses Comet is obviously slightly heavier than, for example, the Fluente, because it is a bigger foil with a longer mast, but this one weighs pretty much spot on 3 kilos. The Comet is constructed out of a different carbon than the other foils in the range. It's a high modulus carbon, and that basically means that the carbon used is stiffer than the carbon used in the other foils. This is really important for the long mast. The 111 centimeter mast really needs this really stiff carbon to prevent torsion and flexion, which would be a major performance hindrance when you're racing. So let's talk a little bit about how the Comet rides. I was expecting it to ride very similar to the Banga foil because the front wing has a very similar shape and the profiles are very similar. However, I was wrong. It rides completely differently than the Banga. The main reason for this, I think, is the much shorter span. It's got 50 millimeters less span than the Banga, and therefore, still having the same chord and similar wing shape, you end up with the foil being slightly less susceptible to ventilations and having a little bit less lift. It's a very fast foil. It hammers upwind. It's definitely competitive. A lot of people were worried, with the smaller wing, will it still be able to handle the angles and speeds, etc., etc. Okay? And I can assure you, yes, I pretty much can go similar speeds to the Mike Slab and the Banga, especially in regards to VMG. What is a little bit different is that you will have to change your tactics a little bit if you're a heavier rider. I found that the Comet didn't quite have the angle that the Banga has, especially in light wind, upwind. But it was actually a little bit faster on your upwind Vmax. So in the end, I was still ending up at my normal 16, 17 knot VMGs upwind. So in a sense, on a race course, it's just as fast as the other foils. So like I said, it's definitely competitive, but you have to change your tactics just a little bit and to use that you have to change your tactics. So it's definitely competitive around the race course. You just have to change It's definitely competitive around the race course. You just have to change your tactics slightly to take advantage of the fact that it's got a slightly higher upwind speed to achieve the VMG at a slightly lower angle. I tested this foil straight out of the box and also sanded. What was quite surprising to me was how good it actually performed straight out of the box. Most carbon foils I know, straight out of the box, they will have issues with ventilations because the mast finish isn't perfect. It's not sanded down properly. A lot of times, like, your satin super smooth finish isn't actually what you want, especially in the waters here. I tend to have to sand down the mast quite a bit, especially like on the Banga, which is quite susceptible to ventilation if it doesn't have a correct finish. When I tested the Moses straight out of the bag, I actually was quite surprised on how resistant it was to ventilation. Like I said, if you compare it like to the Banga, where you put it on the water straight after you get it, you will have problems with ventilation because the finish isn't perfect, it's too smooth. I didn't really have big issues with the Comet, which I thought, okay, this is pretty good. I did find it a little bit slow in that, essentially unfinished, unsanded state, but it handled the ventilations really well. So in a sense, it was actually easier to ride straight out of the box than, for example, the Banga or some other race foils I've tested because it didn't ventilate under high pressure changes. Usually what I find is when you're going really fast downwind, you're going about 30, 31 knots downwind, and then you're having to change from your really deep downwind course to a very high upwind course. If your mast isn't perfectly sanded in a perfect condition, you will immediately ventilate the mast and the wings as you turn back up into the wind after you reach the downwind mark. And I could do very hard course changes with the Comet without getting ventilations, and this was straight out of the box. I could still, on the upwind, if I pushed it quite hard, force a ventilation, but it was a lot harder to do this than, for example, with the Banga. After I tested it in its sort of unsanded state, I sanded the mast down with 800 grit front and 400 grit back, which is my usual sort of finish here for all my race foils, and sanded the front and back wings similarly. I managed to gain about a 2 knot better speed downwind and about a knot more upwind. So fillering, painting and sanding this foil will give you the similar performance enhancement that you normally get on any other carbon race foil. So on the performance of the Comet is competitive. I would, however, say that if you're a heavier rider, you might have issues with it in really light winds. With really light winds, I mean 19 square meter, 20 square meter kite. You're just about going, so 4 to 5 knots. Yep. At 85 kilos, which is my weight, I was having issues. If I made a small mistake in attack, I would drop off the foil, touch down, and I would have quite a problem going. On foils with slightly larger wings, like the Banga, for example, I can pretty much still get 10 out of 10 tacks in those super light airs because the larger, higher span wing will float me a little bit better. So if you're a lighter rider, like around 65 kilos, around that mark, which I've given it to guys to test, the small wing works exceptionally great, especially when the wind picks up, where these riders usually have an issue with like the larger high aspect wings from other brands. The Comet was actually really, really good because they could push it a lot harder and they could go faster. So I would actually really recommend the Comet to lighter riders who find that the bigger foils overpower them very quickly once they get into higher winds. I found that this was probably one of the easiest foils to ride in winds of 20 knots plus with a lot of chop. I didn't have to worry too much about the wings breaching through the waves. I could go at quite high angles, I could go very fast, where I have to be a little bit more careful with higher wingspan wings like the Banga. In that sense, in those super strong winds, I was actually faster on the Comet than I usually am with the Banga in similar conditions. When I've got meter plus chop, very strong gusts, the Comet was easier to handle. So in conclusion, Moses have come up with a really competitive race foil this year, although I would say it might not be the right foil for heavy riders of 85 kilos plus in super light winds. It's a very fast and easy to control foil with probably the best ventilation resistance out of the box of any foil I've tested so far in the racing category. The finish nowadays is excellent on it. The new front wing that I was sent was perfect. There's not a single pinhole, not a single dent in it. And it is one of the lightest race foils you can buy. I hope this review gave you a little bit of an insight to the Moses Comet. If you like our content, please subscribe to the channel, like our videos, leave some comments, leave some feedback. It's always appreciated. And I'll see you next time. See you on the water.